going on, everybody? Nick with the J8 Gang back at it, here to bring you another video. Today we are going over the official 53-man roster, the initial 53-man roster that the Jets have put out today at 4 o'clock p.m., as well as every other team in the NFL. So I'm making this video. We could go through the roster, see how it sits, see what the surprises were. Also, I am going to compare it to my prediction 53 and see how it panned out. There was from looking at it, because I did already look at it, there was a couple pretty surprising cuts and adds. So let's hop right in. Let's get to it. Okay, so big shout out to Gangrene Nation for actually putting it into a list that is easy to read, because going through the Jets app, from where I saw it, was actually not very user friendly. So it is nice to see it in simple form. But we could go through it. We'll go through it here, and then I'll bring up my notes page, and then we could go and compare to see how well my prediction actually was. Was I close? And kind of go through all of that. So quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson. I know I was correct on that. Zach Wilson proved enough. They don't need Tim Boyle as a number 3. I think he's shown enough that going into game day, at least for week 1, you can just have 2 quarterbacks on the roster. They might bring in a guy for the practice squad, but we'll see that as it develops. Running backs, we got Dalvin Cook, Breece Hall, Israel Abanikanda, and Michael Carter. I thought that's the way that it was going to go as well. This is the first kind of big surprise here, is we got 7 wide receivers instead of just 6, with the 6 that I thought they were going to keep was Garrett Wilson, Lazard, Randall Cobb, Mecole Hardman, Brownlee, Xavier Gibson. I thought those 6 were pretty locked in after the news with Corey Davis retiring. I did think that moved Jason Brownlee into a secured number 5, which then opened the door for Xavier Gibson due to the returnability and kind of the gadget speed guy. But they also elected to keep Irv Charles. I wonder if that's because they wanted to protect him to move him down to the practice squad then. But we'll see with all the roster manipulation stuff that happens after the initial 53 comes through. We'll see what happens. Tight ends, Conklin, Uzama, Rucker, and Kenny Yeboah. Kenny Yeboah is also a little bit of a surprise, but we'll go through my initial list. He was in consideration. I do think it's more due to special teams related stuff, but we'll see what the Jets have in store for Kenny Yeboah. Offensive linemen, Dwayne Brown, Lankin, McGovern, AVT, Becton, Joe Tippmann, Max Mitchell, Billy Turner, Wes Schweitzer, and Carter Warren. I mean, all of these are self-explanatory. There might be a couple ads, but that's for a different day. But these are self-explanatory for the initial 53. The DNs, Carl Lawson, Franklin Myers, Bryce Huff, Jermaine Johnson, Will McDonald, and Michael Clemens. Also, kind of everybody knew that this is what the edges were going to look like. Getting on this team in the defensive line room is really tough for how deep it is and how many recent acquisitions through draft and high-priced free agents. It's going to be tough to make this roster. The D tackles are Quentin Williams, Quentin Jefferson, Al Woods, and Solomon Thomas. The one that I'm surprised that got cut, which we'll go over it, is there is no Tenzel Smart. I had him on my prediction. I did think he was going to make it. He showed a lot of explosion from D tackle. So we'll see what happens, but I am pretty surprised that Tenzel Smart didn't make it. The Jets probably will bring him back on a practice squad, is my guess. Linebackers, C.J. Mosley, Quincy Williams, Jamie Sherwood, Zaire Barnes, which I predicted that was going to happen, and then Chaz Surratt. He was actually in a consideration. I did think, again, in the tea leaves, this is where the Hard Knocks actually is pretty cool, because you got to see firsthand. And I remember in the Hall of Fame game, if anyone goes back to watch that Hard Knocks moment, Robert Saleh was actually gushing over Chaz Surratt when he made that interception. He loves his explosiveness. He loves his speed. Potentially a very good special team player. And then who knows from there, develop into a quality backup, potentially even a starter if Jamien Sherwood moves the middle linebacker next year. So we'll see where that lands, but I do think it's again more due to special teams related stuff that Chaz Surratt got kept. Cornerback, Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, Michael Carter, Bryce Hall. Only keeping 4 corners, but that is because Brandon Echols is suspended, so he doesn't actually count towards the initial 53. So once he comes back, it will be 5 corners. 6 if you include Justin Hardy, but we'll get to him in just a minute. Safeties, we got 4: Tony Adams, Amos Whitehead, Ashton Davis. As we go into comparing my prediction to what actually happened, we'll get into Ashton Davis a little bit. I did think he was going to make the roster. He showed vast improvements, I believe, this training camp from my eyes. So I'm happy that he stayed because, like I said, that means that he's impressing. So, and also he is a key member of the special teams. I think he's the personal protector, if I'm not mistaken, for the punt unit. So, and then the special teams, Greg DeLeg, Thomas Hennessy, Justin Hardy, which in my prediction I just had him as a corner. But this is where the biggest surprise is there's no Thomas Morstead, which we'll get into that as we go through the comparison portion of this video. And then the physically unable to perform is Bernard Converse. I did kind of predict that as well. I did have him cut, but I wasn't sure if he wasn't playing and practicing due to injury or something else. I knew he was hurt. I didn't know how bad he was hurt though, but he is going on the physically unable to perform list. So he is actually, I think he is supposed to miss at least the first 4 games, which I don't know how he would. He's a flex player, so he might be like a backup, a third string safety, and a backup nickel or something along those lines. But yeah, so that's pretty much the initial 53 roster for the Jets. Let's hop over to see how the comparison looks between my projection for the initial 53 and how the initial 53 actually wound up. Okay, so we got our initial 53. So this is what I put down, which was in my previous prediction video. So we'll go through it quick. Aaron Rodgers, Zach Wilson, I got that correct. Like I said, I did believe Zach Wilson showed enough just to keep 2 quarterbacks. You could use that roster spot somewhere else by cutting Tim Boyle. The running backs were also correct. I didn't think, which is actually a good sign that Izzy wasn't on the PUP list, so he might actually be ready sooner than week 4. But even without that injury, I didn't think Bam Knight did enough to unseat Izzy. So moving on there. 0 fullbacks. They did end up cutting Nick Bawden, which I was on the fence of him making the roster or not. He did play a lot with the first team against the Giants, so I did think they would actually want to carry a traditional fullback, but they did go a different route. Tight ends, I only had them keeping 3 originally, but I did have Kenny Yeboah into consideration, and it's for the same reasonings that I gave before. I do think it's more special teams reasonings because he was on the roster for special teams, I think, the last 2 or 3 years. So they did actually bring him back more for special teams, and I do think that also means potentially the Uzomah or Rucker will fill in more at fullback then as well, with them not having Nick Bawden on the roster. This is where one of the biggest surprises is. I had the Jets keeping initially 6 receivers. That was pretty much what everyone thought, but they actually did keep 7, with a complete surprise in my eyes of Irvin Charles making the roster. I do think he was a UDFA, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know if they're going to just bump him right down to the practice squad, but they just wanted to keep him just so they could have him locked up and another team doesn't nab him for their practice squad. The offensive linemen were all correct. There's really nothing too much to go in with those. So those are all kind of cookie cutter, self-explanatory. I had the ends all correct. I did have the D tackles correct, except for I did actually have Tenzel Smart making the roster, which I also put as I think it's a Smart being cut as a slight surprise. I do think his explosion was very showing. I thought the Jets would like to keep as many defensive linemen as they could. That was very productive, and I do think in a limited role, Tenzel Smart is productive, has a backup run, stuffing D tackles, stuff like that, goal line. But they decided to go in a different direction. They think the four of Quinnen Williams, Jefferson, Al Woods, and Solomon Thomas is actually good enough to keep the rotation going. For linebackers, I was all correct except for Chaz Surratt, but I was correct in him being in consideration. Like I stated previously, I do think the Hard Knocks, which was pretty cool to leave the tea leaves of how much I think Robert Saleh liked Chaz Surratt, so that's potentially why he made the roster. The cornerbacks were all correct, except I did have him keeping Eccles, but he is suspended. I don't know how. I didn't know at the time how that suspension stuff worked, if he'd hashed to make the initial 53 and going from there. But so that's pretty much it for the corners. They didn't have, on the previous website, they didn't have Hardy as a corner. They just have him as a special teamer, but his position is corner, so that's why he's here. Safeties, I was all correct. The big one was Ashton Davis. I did think he outperformed every other backup safety. He looked really good, especially in the last two preseason games. The other ones, pretty much the other one was in consideration was Bernard Converse, which he actually is on the PUP list, like described before. So he's guaranteed out the first 4 weeks of the season. So once he's back, I don't know if he goes right to the practice squad again or if they actually bring him up to the active roster, because he is one of those tweener safety cornerback pieces for the defense. The special teams, Thomas Hennessy is a rock, obviously. Greg Zuerlein, we all knew was making it. The biggest surprise cut, when I saw Thomas Morstead, I thought they made a mistake. Albeit there is a report that he will return once injury designations and the other roster gymnastics happen. He will be the Jets punter, but it is just a little nerve-wracking that they even allowed him to get out to go, which usually that when these type of things happen, they are brought back, but it is just nerve-wracking because he was a solidified punter that the Jets haven't had in a long, long time. So I was just surprised when I saw it. Like I said again, not to get too much on it, but everyone thought he was just a surefire make on the roster. So, and then this was just what was on ganggreennation.com. I just took this over, but yeah. So that's pretty much it. I feel like I was pretty much right on with the roster. Like I said, there wasn't too many at the time because the way the roster was constructed. There wasn't too many potential surprises on either making or getting cut. There were a couple, obviously. The seventh receiver, just cutting Morstead, like I said before, was just a complete surprise. But then there was some slight surprises that I thought they were going to keep Smart. They end up cutting him, and in return they kept Chaz Surratt, who I did think was close to making the roster, but I thought Smart was going to make it over him. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. That's the initial 53 roster. We'll see in the coming days what injury designations happen. Other people getting cut. The Jets, I think, are 15th in waiver claims. We'll see if they make a waiver claim, and we'll see who gets added to the practice squad. So with that, I am signing out, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.